يا أرض أندلس الحبيبة كلمي إني بكيت على فراقك فاعلمي لم
But it takes a
تسيني
certain type of mentality, you could say. It takes a certain point of view to be able to appreciate what history has to offer. The aim and objective behind this trip was to go and see the historic places that are significant to Muslims and Islam. They have some relevance and importance in Quran, in Hadith. Spain became the seat of knowledge for the religious sciences as well as for the academic sciences. People from the royal families of Europe, when he wanted to impress someone or give them the shock of their life, he would call those delegates, the delegates of the world today haven't changed. Even today, those that are in power are just worried about their power. Them and a few close people around them. It doesn't matter what happens to the rest of the people. It doesn't matter what happens to the Muslims as a whole.
هدموا ما نراح.
Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa amma ba'd. Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to go through the world and see what has happened with the people before us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to explore and wants us to not just walk around as observers, but He wants us to go and see and take lessons. Because throughout the world, regardless of where you go, there are traces of history. And these traces of history are speaking to us about something very important that has happened in the past. And those things that have happened over history, over centuries, and over many eras, they are forming the world. They're all contributing to creating the world as we know it. If it were not for all of those historic events and occurrences, the rise and fall of kings and rulers and nations and people, the evolution of society and the development of different types of infrastructures, if it were not for all of that, society would not be as it is today. But it takes a certain type of mentality, you can say. It takes a certain point of view to be able to appreciate what history has to offer. And it also takes a certain kind of an eye to go and not just see things as they are, see things as traces of history, but to actually visualize what took place, how it took place, and how it affects us today. So I was very fortunate to be able to do a trip of a whole bunch of countries in a relatively short amount of time. And the whole aim and objective behind this trip was to go and see the historic places that are significant to Muslims and Islam. They have some relevance and importance in Quran, in Hadith, or to the history and heritage of Muslims. So we started our journey in Turkey, and from there we went to Jordan, and from Jordan we went into Israel, to Palestine, then back to Jordan, and then to Spain, and from Spain to Morocco. So we covered a total of 7 countries. I'm going to speak to you a little bit about Spain. Of course, I don't want to get into the entire history of Spain because you need to do a whole course, at least one semester, just to understand the basics of the history of Spain. So this is not a lecture on the history of Spain. It's more about some of the things that I saw and I felt and how I correlated them to historic events. we started our trip in Spain in Barcelona, which is a very large city, and it is definitely a multicultural city, and mashallah, very clean and a very modern place. But that's not what our trip was about. We wanted to see mainly southern Spain. So the next day we took these trains, and they have these, mashallah, very fast trains that go at around 300 kilometers an hour. It took us through basically all the way across from north to southern Spain, and we went to a city called Cordova. As we were traveling through Spain, through the countryside, and enjoying the very, very beautiful landscape, you could see structures that looked like mosques. Many of them. And they were mosques, yet they were not mosques. They were mosques in the sense that they once used to be mosques. These were the mosques built by Muslims more than 800 years ago, 600 years ago, 700 years ago. And they all have the standard format of our masajid. You see the dome and you see the minaret. But they are not mosques because they have all been turned into churches. So as you're going through the country, you see these over and over and over, and you can't mistake it for anything else because the format and the structure, the architecture of churches that are purpose-built are distinctly different even from those eras. If you look at the churches that were made and constructed at that time, they're distinctly different from mosques. So these were mosques that had once been the place, the center of sujood and ruku' and tilawat of Quran and dhikrullah, and today they are churches. Islam came into Spain not by any desire of the Muslims themselves per se. Islam came into Spain at the request of people from the Christian empire, you can say. What had happened was that in the time where many tabi'is were still alive, there was a king who ruled over Spain by the name of Roderick. And Roderick was known for a whole bunch of things. And one of those things was he used to exploit young boys and girls. He used to take them, keep them under his wing, supposedly for training them and educating them, and then he would do all kinds of things with them. Now, Roderick had his, you can say his governor, his count as they would call them, that was across the water in what is northwest Africa, and his name was Julian. And Count Julian's daughters were one of those people who got exploited. And this caused anger, obviously, grief, and it created in him the desire to see this man go down. So he approached the Muslims. He approached Musa ibn Nusayr, who is the conqueror, the Muslim conqueror of northwest Africa. He is the one who conquered that region, which is today Morocco and Tunisia and Algeria and Libya. He's the one who conquered those lands for the Muslims. And he was a tabi'i. He was a pious man and someone who liked to not just take the back seat and steer the battles from there, but he liked to be at the forefront. He was one of those leaders that fought from the front and controlled and directed from the front and not from the back. When Julian approached him, he said, "Look, this king is not doing anything for the people. The people are oppressed, they're being taxed, they're being exploited, and no one is safe from the hands of this man. So I am ready to support you with all my men, and I would like you to go in and take over this land of Spain. And I am here with my troops, with my navy, with whatever I have, to lend my assistance. So Musa ibn Nusayr wrote to the Khalifa and said, this is the proposition that has come from this side. And according to Julian, the people are also behind us. The people want this. They want this government and this regime to be overthrown. What should we do? So the Khalifa replied that, let's not be hasty, let's think about it a little bit. Send some men and just explore first. So the first group of people was sent just to explore, and they came back and gave the demographics of the region. How many people, how many forts, what kind of armies, and so on and so forth. After some time of deliberation and thinking, it was finally decided that we're going to move in. And for that to happen, Musa ibn Nusayr appointed a young man by the name of Tariq bin Ziyad. And Tariq was from the mountainous region of Morocco, you can say, Tanja, Tangier. And these were people known as the Berbers. And the Berberi people were dwellers of the mountains. They were rough and tough. In fact, many of them had revolted against the Muslims after the Muslims had conquered them. But those revolts had been put to rest. And from amongst the people that came forward as a very brave fighter, as a very smart thinker and planner, was this young man Tariq bin Ziyad. So Musa ibn Nusayr deputes him to go and first and foremost take control of the waters. And that's exactly what they did. And they did that by first taking a few small islands. After the islands had been taken, they came onto the main land. And that is the place where there is a mountain which became known as Jabal al-Tariq, Gibraltar. And from there, Tariq made his next move. And this was the place where he gathered his people, and he had not a very large number of people, not a very large navy, not a very large army, but he had been promised some support and some reinforcements from behind, and based on that he was going to make his move. But he told the people, he told his soldiers that, look, you people are all we have. And now in front of you, you have this country, you have this land, you have these people who will show you no mercy. And behind you, all you have is the ocean. And there's nowhere you can really go. We read in stories about how he had all the ships burned, but there is no authentic historic book that actually mentions this. There is no authentic text of history that states that, okay, he gathered everyone, he had all the ships burned so that they can't go back. But it seems like this was more of a figure of speech that was used by certain people, and then people started taking it literally. It became like a saying, burning all the ships. So whether he actually burned the ships or not, it's something very doubtful. But the fact is that he did exhort his men and encourage his men to move forward. And they moved forward very swiftly and very quickly. And they starting from southern Spain. We're at the southern tip of Spain, moving up, taking one city at a time. In the meantime, Roderick finds out, and like I mentioned, he is already losing support in the hearts of his own people. The people are weak, they're overly taxed, overly burdened. And this was a similar case to what happened with the Romans. When the Muslims conquered the Roman world and conquered the Persian world, one of the things that assisted the Muslims in that is the fact that those people had lost faith in their rulers. Why? And I'm mentioning this for a very, very important reason. Because history repeats itself. Those people felt like they were just pawns. They were just there as a means to an end so that the rulers could take taxes from them, become wealthy, spend those taxes on their own desires, on living very, very lavish lives, and using that money to wage wars against their counterparts. And sometimes, as in the case of the Roman Empire, the wars were waged in the name of religion. But they were fighting against one another. They were factions. And each group would rise and say that we are the true followers of Christ. And those are the people of falsehood. And it is our religious responsibility to go and destroy them. And so wars would be waged. Now wars are expensive business. They take a lot of money. Where do you get that money? You tax the people. And you tax them. And you tax them. And you tax them. So people will give on the name of religion. But they're going to give to a certain extent. And after that they're going to say, well, what's the bigger picture here? What's actually being achieved? It's not like you're donating to a mosque, where you donate to the mosque and then in a while the mosque is up and you say, oh wow, we donated to this cause. It's up. Or you donate to a school and then eventually after some time the school comes into existence and you're happy and say, okay, we gave to this cause and now we have it. Or you're giving taxes and you're actually seeing the results of those taxes in the form of healthcare, in the form of good roads and good systems. You're benefiting directly from this money that you're giving. But when you keep taxing the people for wars, and sometimes you lose, sometimes you win, and there is no decisive result out of that, and it's been going on for generations. For decades and decades and decades, the wars just continue. People eventually get sick of it. And this is what had been happening. For generations, people's money had been fueling these wars. Eventually people just get sick and tired of it. They say, we don't want it anymore. We'd rather someone else come and rule over us. They don't have to be our kind or our type of people, but at least they should know how to use the resources of the people. So this was a similar state of affairs in Spain when the Muslims walked in. And the battles were tough. The Muslims lost a lot of men. The other side lost a lot of men. But gradually and slowly, they started taking a hold of one city after another. And the cities in the old times were like city-states. Each city was a state. It had an area that would fall under it. And the ruler of that city-state would be the ruler of that neighboring area as well. As the Muslims took these, they started gaining resources. They started gaining supplies of foods and supplies of animals and all kinds of things. And they just kept moving forward until these armies were eventually defeated. After that, there was kind of a time period of inactivity. There was a time period of confusion. There was a time period when the Muslim leaders were debating whether to go forward or not. Do we want to just keep going forward? And then every now and then you have a revolt. The people revolt against you because you've taken them by force. So a lot of thinking and a lot of planning was done. And Musa ibn Nusayd eventually, he came to a halt. He said, let's start working on these cities and start building them and constructing them and bringing some quality to this new land that we have. After some time, after Musa ibn Nusayd, another man was put in charge of those armies by the name of Abdurrahman al-Ghafiqi. He was also a tabi'i. And he was from the students of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. He carried on with these armies. He just kept moving north until he made his way into France, into southern France, and he conquered cities like Lyon and Toulouse and Marseille and all of these places, all the way up to a place called Poitiers, which is only about 40 kilometers south of Paris. The Muslim armies had reached that far. And his intention was that I'm going to keep pushing forward, and from this route, go across and take Istanbul, take Constantinople. Anyways, that's how Islam comes in. But after this, even though there was a period of time when there was relative calmness, there was relative peace, there was a chance for development and growth, one thing continued throughout the history of Al-Andalus. And that was that everyone had their eyes, had their sights on this land, which is beautiful, very, very fertile. Even today, you see the countryside of Spain. There's hardly an acre that they have left spared. Every piece of the land is being used. And it's producing all kinds of beautiful fruits and vegetables. Amazing resources. So everyone had their sights on it, and everyone was basically trying to use it to their advantage. Now this is where the mistake takes place. When we start looking at countries or land or nations as a personal property, or we are in it just for the thrill of owning it, of ruling it, and that thrill of ruling, that thrill of control, it's something very, very powerful. In fact, the intoxication of power is probably much more dangerous than any other intoxication known to man. Because it is for power, for the sake of power, that all the major wars have been waged, and it's for the sake of power that millions and millions of people have been killed. It's just a struggle for power. And Muslims are no different in this. When Muslims start struggling and vying with one another for power, the same thing is going to happen. And that's what happened at Andalus, where one person would be made the ruler and somebody else would come and challenge him. And then he would try to topple the first person, and then as soon as the first person was toppled, there was a third person waiting in line to topple the second person, and same thing happened with the third person and the fourth and the fifth, and this just became a chain. In fact, when I was reading the history of early Andalus, I was shocked to see that these guys were changing kings like every 6 months. There were some who only ruled for 2 months. If a king made it for a year, if a ruler made it for a year, his name went down in history as a long-time ruler. I was shocked and appalled. Because everyone wants a piece of the pie. That's all it is. So you constantly have these contenders. People that are contending for that seat, for that position. And then at one point it became a battle of families and tribes. There were these people who were from this line of Arabs, and there were these people who were from this line of Arabs, and there were these people who were from this line of Berbers. Now they're all at odds with one another. And this went on for hundreds of years. Like I said, in between, there were periods of calm, there were periods of growth, there were periods of economic stability, and there was a time when Spain, Andalus, became an asylum for people around the world who were being oppressed by their rulers. For example, the Jews. For hundreds of years, Spain was the place of choice for Jews to go to who were being oppressed by their own rulers and by different rulers in different parts of the world. And the Muslims gave them a place, they gave them rights, they gave them a lot of things. And so they prospered under that. This was a time of the development of the sciences. Philosophy thrived and prospered. The medical sciences thrived and prospered through Spain and through the Muslim doctors. In fact, all the way till the end of Muslim Spanish history, the only doctors that were doctors were the Muslims. Even when the Muslims lost Spain, the only doctors around at that time were the Muslims. That's one of the reasons why they weren't expelled. The Muslims weren't expelled from that country. So the sciences prospered. Knowledge thrived and prospered. Cordova, which was one of the cities that we visited, it had this massive masjid, this huge masjid. Now this masjid originally was a cathedral. It was a cathedral, and the rule in Islamic law is that if an area is taken by the Muslims peacefully, by a treaty, then the Muslims don't touch. The Muslims do not touch or tamper with the religious symbols or the places of worship of other religions. But if it is taken by force, then they have the right, the Muslim leaders have the right to take those other places of worship and turn them into masjids or do whatever they want. Now this was a case of a peaceful agreement, or not. There's a difference of opinion among historians. But nevertheless, the Muslims allowed it to function as a church, as a cathedral. But what they did was, because they did not need, those people did not need all of this space, and the Muslims took some of that space and dedicated it to a masjid. So the cathedral and the church, they operated side by side harmoniously for many, 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 many years. Eventually, as the numbers of Muslims grew, and Cordova was one of the most beautiful and central cities in the world in terms of learning, in terms of sciences, in terms of inventions and all of these things. So the numbers grew very fast, and it was also a center of business. So the Muslim king, who could have just taken the other side and just said, okay, you know what, we're turning all of it into a mosque, he requested the Christians that, can you please sell this portion to us? Sell your portion to us because we need the space. Our numbers are growing. So they didn't agree. So the Muslim king kept trying to convince them, and he said, you can take any amount of money that you want for it. Anything that you want. They still weren't happy to let go of it. But after a while, they came back and said, okay, fine. We've agreed to let you take this and basically sell our portion of this building to you for this much money. And on top of that, we want you to build churches for us. We want you to fund churches for us in such and such and such place. So the Muslim king agreed. He agreed. He said, that's fine. So, in that way, this place legally entirely became a masjid, and then it was expanded. It has hundreds and hundreds of pillars. And tons of oil were used to light the lamps. And tons of wax was used to light the candles. It was a very beautifully constructed and a very well-maintained masjid. And in the library of the masjid, they had more than 400,000 books. 400,000 books. And talking about books, Qurtuba at that time became known worldwide for its libraries. There were, they say, 72 such libraries in that city. 400,000, 500,000 books. This is a time when you don't have modern printing presses. Everything is written by hand. In fact, in the books of history, you find a very interesting story. A person travels to Qurtuba in search of a book. He's traveled a great distance. He needs a book. He's a very big scholar, very heavily involved in research. And he comes to the center of books to look for this book. And one day, while at a book auction, he sees that title. He sees the title and he says, finally, I found it. So he places a bid for it. As soon as he bids for it, someone else comes and raises the bid. Now he bids, this other gentleman raises the bid, and he keeps going back and forth, until the bid gets so high, it reaches such a level that it's out of his capacity. I mean, the guy is just placing a ridiculous amount of money to get this book. So this scholar is saying that this must be a very keen researcher, a very great scholar. I need to just go and congratulate him for acquiring this book, and congratulate him for his thirst and his desire for knowledge. So he went and met him, and he said, you must be a very great faqih. He says, no, I'm no faqih. He said, so the book, you're interested in, this is a very specialized book. Very few people would be interested in it. So what interested you? He said, really? He said, I don't even know what's in that book. He said, what? He said, yeah, I saw the book. It had a nice, beautiful cover, had nice paper. And you see, I have a library. At that time, it was like everyone's pride and joy to have a lot of books in their house. It was a matter of honor for them. He said, so I'm building a library in my house, and I see this book. There's one shelf of mine that has a little bit of space left on it. And this book was just the perfect size for that little space. And that's why I bought this book. I don't even know what's in it. So the Shaykh turned around and he said a saying which means that almonds were given to the one who doesn't even have teeth. In other words, this guy got this book. I traveled far and wide to get this book, and it goes to a guy who probably can't even read it. So this was the state of knowledge and resources at that time. People like Imam Qurtubi, Ibn Rushd, and Ibn al-Arabi, and all of these great thinkers, writers, fuqaha, mufassirin, muhaddithin, were created in this time period. And knowledge was everywhere. And Spain became the seat of knowledge for the religious sciences as well as for the academic sciences. People from the royal families of Europe would send their children to Spain to learn from the Muslim scientists. And even today, if you go to the museum, there is a fort right in front of the Jami Masjid of Cordova, and it has now been turned into a museum. It is more or less a collection of Muslim contributions. And you see so many inventions there, so many different types of devices, whatever the Muslims had to offer at that time, and it's something very, very amazing. You learn about how the Muslim scientists figured out things about astronomy and the world's geography hundreds of years before the Europeans did. Even though the credit usually goes to people like Copernicus and so on and so forth, but the Muslims were way, way ahead of that game. And it's being openly said there, it's being openly stated there, that these are the actual groundbreakers and the actual pioneers. These are the people who invented things like surgical procedures. These are the people who invented medicines. These are the people who invented, this chemical process and that chemical process. And these are the people who invented this tool and that instrument and so on and so forth. Anyways, during our stay in Cordova, we were there actually for the masjid. It turned out that the day we arrived, the masjid was closed due to some holiday. It just closed as soon as we got there, so we had to wait the next day. Now the next day, it opens up at 8:30. So we go, our hotel was in fact right in front of the door of the masjid, like right in front. The only thing between us and the masjid was a very small, narrow street. That's it. So we're right at the masjid. That's where we stayed. So I go in, and for the last day and a half, we've just been adoring and admiring this massive, colossal structure. It's huge. You'll get tired if you try to walk around it. And for a long time, it was the largest mosque in the Muslim world, and the most beautiful mosque. The minar is so high, it's like just this massive tower. Anyways, when I went in, I got the shock of my life. And it was probably one of the saddest experiences in my life. Because as I was about to enter, the person at the door asked me to remove my topi. I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, you need to take that off." I said, "No, I don't take this off." So he told me again that I have to take it off. He said, "You can't go in. I'm not going to let you in with that on your head." I said, "Well, I'm going to go in with this on my head." So we went back and forth, and finally he gave up. I said, "Look, this is a religious hat that I'm wearing, and I'm not going to take it off." And inside my heart was just bleeding. But this is a place that for hundreds of years was the markaz of Islam. Thousands and thousands of people used to pray here. And the great khatibs of the ummah used to give khutbahs here. And this was a place that was populated day and night with sujood with great awliyaullah, with great ulama. And today, I am being asked to remove my symbol of Islam before going in. So I decided at that point that either I'm going to go in like this or I'm not going to go in. And at that point, the guard let me go in. I was prepared to walk away from there. And when I walked in, and I have this on my phone, for those of you who may have seen it, I walked in to be welcomed by church music, which was blaring on the speakers of this former masjid. And the church music is so loud and it's so annoying that you can't even think properly. And all around, you can see the signs, whatever signs that used to exist of this being a masjid, they've all been erased and deleted. The verses of the Quran that used to be written on the arches and on the ceilings are gone. The examples of beautiful Muslim art and calligraphy are gone, and they have been long replaced with paintings of biblical figures and biblical stories and saints of the Christians, and they are everywhere, all around you. And you're walking around wondering what is going on here. And the more you walk, the more depressed and sad you feel. You feel like the place is being desecrated. The only thing left of the old masjid is a section at the front where they have put up a fence, this metal fence. You can't go beyond it. It's where the old mihrab is, and they've left that intact. So you see the old mihrab, where hundreds and hundreds of great imams of the Muslims used to stand and give their khutbah. But that's it, just as a reminder. And in other parts of the masjid, you find, the pews, the church benches. You find priests walking around in their robes, and you're just stunned. It's overwhelming. It was one of the most confusing and saddening experiences for me, and I walked out with my head down. I told the brothers that I can't do this anymore. I need to get out of here. And likewise was the rest of Spain. You see great fortresses that were built by Muslims. You see places like Madinatul Zahra, which is about 7 kilometers from Cordova. It was a city built by one of the last Andalusian kings on the name of his wife, and he beautified it. It was discovered, or not discovered, but it was sort of restored by archaeologists. They dug up large portions of it and discovered old structures and this and that, and they've tried to restore it. But it was one of the most beautiful towns or villages or places in the world, and the kings and queens of the world used to come just to see it, just to witness its beauty. And he had made a palace there, which was decorated with gold and silver, and in the middle of his darbar, his courtyard, he had this fountain, and instead of filling the fountain with water, he had filled it with mercury. And when he wanted to impress someone or give them the shock of their life, he would call those delegates, the delegates of nations who would come to see him, the diplomats, or the kings and rulers themselves, at the time when the sun was just rising. And what would happen at that time is that the sun's rays would fall directly into this pool of mercury, this silver pool of mercury, and he would have someone stir that pool, stir that fountain. And as the mercury would start spinning, because there's gold and silver and all of that all around, it would give the impression to the person who was standing there that the whole room is spinning. And sometimes they would get dizzy and fall. And that was like his little gimmick for impressing people. Until one great khatib and alim of the Muslims Sheikh Mundir ibn Sa'id rahimahullah, when he came, and before he arrived, the king was talking to his people about how beautiful of a thing he has built, and there is nothing like this in the world. And when the Shaykh arrived, he repeated his statement that there is no place like this, there's no palace like this in the world, and I have constructed something that no one has ever been able to. So the Shaykh looked at him and said, Your Majesty, I thought you were so smart. Allah has given you so much intelligence, and then you say something like this? He said, What do you mean? He said, No, really, I thought you were someone of great wisdom, of great depth. But you are praising yourself for something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have given to the disbelievers, but He didn't. He said, What's that? So he read to him this ayat of the Quran, وَلَوْلَا يَكُونَ النَّاسُ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا لَجَعَلْنَا لِمَنْ يَكْفُرُ بِالرَّحْمَنِ لِبُيُوتِهِمْ سُقَفًا مِنْ فِضَّةٍ وَمَعَارِجَ عَلَيْهَا يَظْهَرُونَ وَلِبُيُوتِهِمْ أَبْوَابًا وَسُرُرًا عَلَيْهَا يَتَّكِئُونَ وَزُخْرُفًا وَإِنْ كُلُّ ذَلِكَ لَمَّا مَتَاعُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةُ عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. That if it weren't for the danger of the people of Iman leaving their Iman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have given disbelievers even more than what they have. In fact, He says, I would have given them houses with ceilings made out of gold, and stairways made out of gold, and doors made out of gold and silver. I would have given them all of that. But the people of weak Iman would have left Iman just to have those things. Allah says, I would have given those things to those people. And you are considering it a matter of pride that Allah has given it to you? You should be ashamed of yourself. So the king was in fact ashamed of himself, and he took all the gold and silver decorations off and left it. It was a somewhat more simpler state. The famous fortress of Al-Hamra, known as Alhambra. Even today, on the walls, it is carved, La ghaliba illallah. There is no overpower other than Allah. Allah is the one who overpowers. Now, towards the end of the Muslim rule of Spain, of Andalus, and the end came for the same reasons that I mentioned. They got divided and then subdivided, and eventually over the centuries what had happened is that everyone had just formed a small kingdom within the kingdom. So he's got his state, he's got his own state, the other guy's got his own state, the other guy's got... And all the states are just bickering and fighting with one another. And when they are fighting, sometimes they'll go to the non-Muslims and ask them for help. So if one Muslim ruler of a state feels threatened by another Muslim ruler, he'll go to the French, or he'll go to the Spaniards, or he'll go to whoever and say, hey, I need help against these guys, can you help me take them out? So they'll come in, they'll help him take him out, and then of course they'll take this guy out himself. And this kept happening, and kept happening. So the Muslim rule got weaker and weaker and weaker. In the meantime, no one cares. The ruling party is happy because they've got money, they've got lots of money. Wars are fought now only against Muslims to take what they have. So you win some, you lose some. And this has been going on for generations. This is the time when the kings and the queens of Europe see the opportune moment to go in and take Spain back, or take it for themselves. And that's exactly what they did, attacking one state at a time. And yes, it so happened that the rulers of the other states would not stand up for their Muslim counterparts just out of fear of losing their own chair. So these guys would come and strike deals with them that, look, we'll leave you as you are, just let us attack those guys. Or help us attack them. They say, okay, fine, we'll help you attack them, no problem. And like this, piece by piece, the land of Andalus was given away until there was just a little bit left. There were a few city-states left. And the last king of Andalus, who tried to go and wage some battles and got caught as a prisoner, to free himself, he gave up the rest of Andalus. and he himself gave away the keys of places like the fort of Al-Hamra and the cities that were remaining in the hands of the Muslims, including Medina al-Zahra. He gave all of those away and he kissed the hand of Ferdinand the king just to save his own life. And then he went crying. And his mother said that, son, if you could not stand up and fight for your people like a man, what is the point of coming here and standing in front of me crying like a baby? So, it was a glorious time for the world, because the whole world benefited from the Muslim contributions in Spain. And the whole world lost when the Muslims lost Spain, because those contributions came to an end. And when the Muslims lost Spain, they didn't lose it with grace, they lost it with a great deal of disgrace. In fact, they were threatened to be killed, to be annihilated, if they did not leave Islam. So there was mass migration of Muslims from Spain into North Africa, back into Morocco and those areas. And some got killed, and the weak ones left their deen, left their religion. And historians say that the progenies of those people remained in Spain and are there till today. That's why you will see many people from the Spanish people who resemble the Arabs. They resemble them not only in their features, but also in their demeanor, the way they hold themselves, the way they speak, their manner of meeting and greeting, and all of those things. It resembles the Arabs very much. Wallahu a'lam. But this is what history says. So what lessons do we learn? Don't go back. It's too much. It's an emotional roller coaster. It really, really hurts to see what we had and what we lost, what we gave away by our own foolishness. But on a more serious note, those things that are destroying the Muslim world today haven't changed. Even today, those that are in power are just worried about their power. Them and a few close people around them. It doesn't matter what happens to the rest of the people. It doesn't matter what happens to the Muslims as a whole. It doesn't matter that there are Muslims all around the world. It doesn't matter anymore. It's just about me and my seat. I need to stand up for that seat. As long as this happens and we don't have sincere rulers, we don't have sincere leaders, it's very, very difficult for us to come out of this plight. The other lesson we learned from Andalus is division. Division kills. Division killed us. It destroyed us. There was a time when a father would be waging wars, or a son would be waging war against his own father to overthrow his father to take his kingdom. A father or a son or a nephew waging war against any one of these elders to take whatever they have. Going head to head, clashing. So sometimes we look at our own state in the communities that we live in, that we grew up in, and you wonder, there is nothing that's really at stake here. Even then there is so much division. There is no powerful seat here. There is no kingdom here. There's no government here. But still, so easily we get divided. Over the most minute things. Over the most trivial things we get divided. And that, depending on what scale the division is at, that's the effect it has on the generations afterwards. You have a group, you have a community, and then a group breaks off, and then within that group, more groups are formed, and then within those groups, subgroups are formed, and it goes on and on and on and on. And everyone is bickering about the next person. So I think that Muslims in North America have both a very great opportunity and a very great responsibility. And that is that they need to unite themselves for the greater cause. What is our greater cause? Our greater cause is not to overthrow a government or overthrow a country. Our greater cause is to establish deen in our lives and to make sure that it lasts in the generations to come. That's what our greater cause is. We work like others work. We go to school like others go to school. We build families like others build families. We do all of those things. So in these aspects, we're no different from the next person. We're exactly the same. These are commonalities. But the thing that we need to set us apart is our religious identity, our religious practices, our beliefs, our morals, and our practices. If we come here and allow these things to get watered down just because society says so or society wants so, we're gone, we're done. And we can't do this on our own. We can't do this in small groups of 10 and 15. We need to bring the broader communities together so that everyone is sort of leaning on the next person. There's an environment where it becomes easy to practice deen because you have people that are supporting you. The people that are in charge of masajid, the people that are in charge of Islamic organizations have the same responsibility of trying to keep people together. Because division, it starts with a word, it goes to the heart, and it damages the future generations. And unity also, it can start with just a word that will bring others on board, a kind word, a gentle word, something that includes the other person into what you're doing. It affects the heart and it unites the future generations to come. So we have a lot of things to learn from Al-Andalus, Spain. Interestingly, southern Spain is still referred to by the Spanish people as Andalusia. And I was very surprised, pleasantly surprised, to see in a city called Malaga, which used to be called Malika, and that's where we flew from to go to Morocco. I saw signs in the Arabic language, signs for Al Jazeera Al Khadra. I was so surprised. I said, Subhanallah. So they say, هذه آثارنا تدل علينا فانظر بعدنا إلى الآثار. The people of Andalus are telling us that this is what we've left behind. So after we leave, look at what we've left behind. And we say to them that where did you go wrong? What happened? Why did you fall into all of these kinds of divisions and factions and just worshipping your own desires, your own needs, and your own self? Where did you get that from? The Prophet ﷺ came and united the people. Sahaba radiallahu anhum united the people. What went wrong with you people? So it's important for us to stay in touch with the message and the method of our Prophet ﷺ. We keep that in front of us, and inshallah we keep the greater good in front of us. There will always be minor disagreements on different things. People will have a difference of opinion on a political issue. People may have a difference of opinion on a religious issue. People may have a difference of opinion on some other issue, on a social issue. Those differences of opinion will remain, they cannot be eradicated. The problem arises when we allow those differences of opinion to divide us, and to cut us off from the others, and even worse, put us against others. Now, instead of working for the cause, all our energy is being challenged to working against someone or something. And that's a big waste. So these are some things that we picked up while we were there. And if any of you ever go to Spain, by all means go and see. But go with an eye of ibrah. In Arabic they say ibrah, the eye that takes lessons. Don't just go as an observer. Today, thousands of people from around the world are flocking to this place. Many non-Muslims are coming, flocking, they're seeing it as tourists, they're observing it, but people aren't taking lessons. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ. Allah says, take lessons. سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِ. Go throughout the world and see the outcome of the people before you. See where they went wrong. See where people went wrong, and we try to save ourselves and our families and the people around us from making the same mistakes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq and understanding and guidance. I'll be speaking inshallah about the rest of my trip tonight after Isha. So, talk about Turkey, talk about Israel, talk about Jerusalem, talk about Jordan. These were all fantastic places. I'll go into a little bit more detail because frankly, I enjoyed those places a lot more. There was much more to see in terms of the places we visited. And to me, there was much more history to connect with it. It's better to connect to a living history than to connect with a history that's gone and it's not around you anymore. So inshallah we'll talk about that after Isha. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdihi, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka.